Imagine a battlefield where everything that defined modern Europe hangs on a few muddy hours, and the army history says must lose wins. In our timeline, the guns fell silent and an empire collapsed. But history is not inevitable. It is fragile, balanced on weather, timing, and human decisions. And at Waterloo, the fate of Europe balanced on all three. So what if the outcome had been different? What if Napoleon had won? To understand how radically that victory could have reshaped the world, we have to return to the summer of 1815, to a continent exhausted by war, terrified of revolution, and desperate for stability. Europe in 1815 was not at peace. It was holding its breath. For more than 2 decades, the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars had torn through the old order. Monarchies had fallen. Borders had dissolved. Entire political systems were shaken by the idea that sovereignty might belong to citizens, not kings. Napoleon Bonaparte rose out of that chaos. A brilliant commander, a political opportunist, and a symbol of revolutionary energy, he built an empire that stretched from Spain to Poland. Wherever his armies marched, they carried not just cannons but legal reforms, administrative modernization, and the unsettling promise of social mobility. But empires built on conquest demand constant victory, and after the disastrous invasion of Russia and years of grinding coalition warfare, Napoleon was defeated and exiled. Europe's monarchs gathered to restore what they called order. Then Napoleon escaped. In March 1815, he returned to France, and soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined him. The king fled. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon once again controlled France, but not Europe's trust. The great powers, Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, moved immediately. They would not negotiate. They would destroy him. The decisive confrontation came near a Belgian village, Waterloo. In reality, a combination of mud, miscommunication, and the timely arrival of Prussian forces doomed Napoleon's army. But alternate history lives in the margins of possibility. Imagine this instead. The rain clears sooner. French artillery deploys earlier. Napoleon commits his reserves at the decisive moment. Marshal Grouchy successfully delays the Prussians. The Anglo-Allied army under Wellington fractures under sustained assault. By late afternoon, coalition lines collapse. Wellington retreats in disorder. The Prussians arrive too late to reverse the tide. For the first time since Napoleon's return, Europe's coalition army is not merely checked, it is shattered. Napoleon has won Waterloo, but a battlefield victory is only the beginning. What happens next determines everything. The immediate shock would be psychological as much as military. Europe's monarchies had framed Napoleon as a relic, a defeated tyrant grasping at relevance. His victory would shatter that narrative overnight. France, electrified by triumph, rallies behind him. Political opposition weakens. Napoleon, ever pragmatic, understands he cannot simply resume endless conquest. France is exhausted. So is Europe. Instead, he pivots. Napoleon offers negotiations, not from desperation, but strength. He presents himself as the guarantor of stability, a ruler who will respect borders in exchange for recognition. Britain faces a dilemma. Continued war is costly and uncertain. Austria and Russia fear revolutionary unrest more than French dominance. A negotiated settlement becomes plausible. If Napoleon secures even temporary peace, the political architecture of Europe shifts dramatically. The Congress system, designed to suppress revolution, loses legitimacy. Napoleon's survival proves that military intervention cannot easily erase political change. Liberal movements across Europe gain confidence. Constitutional reform becomes harder to suppress when France stands as a living counterexample to absolutism. Nationalism evolves differently. In our timeline, Napoleon's defeat allows conservative monarchies to dominate European politics for decades, but a victorious France complicates that balance. German and Italian unification movements, inspired partly by resistance to French occupation, might develop more cautiously or along different lines. Without the symbolic triumph of Waterloo, the narrative of conservative restoration weakens. Britain, meanwhile, reassesses its role. It remains a naval and economic superpower, but continental intervention becomes riskier. Diplomacy replaces crusading coalitions. And Napoleon himself? Victory does not make him immortal, but it gives him leverage. He likely governs with sharper restraint. His regime, tempered by years of war, leans toward institutional consolidation. legal reforms spread. Administrative modernization accelerates. France becomes less an empire of conquest and more a model of centralized governance. The ripple effects extend beyond Europe. Colonial politics shift as European rivalries cool or reconfigure. Latin American independence movements, already underway, encounter a different diplomatic landscape. The balance between empires becomes more fluid, less defined by the post-Waterloo settlement that shaped the 19th century. Most importantly, the myth of inevitability dissolves. Waterloo in our history symbolized the triumph of old Europe over revolutionary upheaval. In this alternate path, Napoleon's victory signals something else, that modern political forces, nationalism, meritocracy, centralized administration cannot be rolled back so easily. Europe becomes a continent negotiating with modernity earlier, more unevenly, and perhaps more violently. But victory does not erase tension. Napoleon's empire remains fragile. Succession questions loom. Rival powers rebuild. Peace is temporary, not permanent. Yet even a decade of survival could rewrite alliances, borders, and political norms. The Europe that emerges is less conservative, less stable in its old hierarchies, and more openly shaped by the forces unleashed in 1789. History would still move toward industrialization, nationalism, and global empire, but through different channels, at different speeds, and different symbols. And that is the quiet truth of alternate history. Moments like Waterloo are not just battles. They are crossroads where countless futures compete. In our world, Napoleon's defeat ushered in a century defined by balance of power diplomacy and cautious restoration. In another, his victory might have accelerated Europe's confrontation with modern political identity, reshaping how nations formed, how revolutions spread, and how power was legitimized. The mud, the timing, the decisions of a single day, all deciding which version of Europe would exist. History feels permanent because we only see the path that happened, but just beyond it lies a shadow continent, a Europe that almost was. And the echoes of that unreal victory remind us how fragile the world can be when shaped by human choice. If you enjoy exploring the turning points where history could have unfolded differently, subscribe for more journeys into the moments that defined and almost redefined our past.